People still get into their seats, but it's 1 o'clock, and I want to welcome you to the July 9th Blueprint Budget Workshop. I will now call the virtual meeting of the IA Board Budget Workshop to order. As a housekeeping matter, as we normally do, ask you to mute your microphone, except when you're speaking during the meeting. This meeting is being held as a virtual meeting pursuant to Executive Order 20-69, issued by Governor DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, which authorized local governing bodies to conduct meetings without having a quorum physically present or at any specific location. The executive order also authorized the use of communications media technology, virtual meetings such as audio and video conferencing. Executive Order 20-69 has been extended by subsequent executive orders, including the most recent Executive Order 20-150, issued by Governor DeSantis on June 23rd, 2020. Mr. Pingree, please address notice of the meeting and the submission of public comments.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Everybody can hear me okay? Show of hands. All right, good deal. This virtual meeting has been noticed with information for the public to view the meeting in real time. The notice also invited members of the public to submit comments until 5 p.m. yesterday evening via email to comments@blueprintia.org to allow for adequate time for you to review, commissioners and mayor, IA Board of Directors, the comments submitted. Commissioners, these comments were distributed to you this morning about 9 a.m. in advance of this meeting for your consideration and prior to any action being taken at this workshop. All comments received will be included in the official record of the public meeting. These comments have also been posted on the Blueprint website, so they can be viewed by members of the public. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. For the record, all commissioners are attending the virtual meeting remotely using WebEx as the cloud platform for video and audio conferencing. If we experience interruptions through the disruptions or glitches in the technology being used, I will recess the meeting until the interruption is resolved. If the interruption cannot be resolved in a reasonable amount of time, I will adjourn the meeting. The temporary recess or adjournment of the meeting is necessary to ensure compliance with the Sunshine Law. I'm now going to ask staff to do a roll call.
Okay, turn it over to Ms. Ivy on staff to perform that roll call. And I do note at this time, before Angela starts, I am aware that Commissioner Jackson will not be available for either the workshop or the regular meeting. Angela, please. Angela, you're on mute. Can you try talking? All right, I'm going to take roll call. You take Mayor Daley.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair Bryant.
Present.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Matlow.
I'm here. Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay. Commissioner Richardson.
Here.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Deloach.
I'm here.
I'm here. Commissioner Proctor.
Here.
Sir. Commissioner Minor.
I am here.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Dozier.
I'm here.
All right. It also works as a mic check. Commissioner Lindley.
Here. Hi.
Thank you. And Commissioner Maddox.
Here.
Okay, a quorum is present, Madam Chair.
Thank you. As a matter of housekeeping, I want to remind commissioners that we are under our bylaws. Robert's Rules of Order revised will apply for the meeting. Since this is my first meeting and Brian has just left me, you guys work with me today as we go through this process. By way of example, though, this meeting anyone on a motion, even once, has preference over anyone who has already spoken on it. I do expect all commissioners to keep remarks germane to the motion under discussion. Keep in mind that I will adhere to Robert's rules for amending motions. So we will not go beyond secondary amendments. Thus, the limit is an amendment to the main motion. Likewise, for substitute motions, an amendment to a substitute motion is the limit. I'm going to stop for a minute. It's not in my script, but I want to make sure there are no questions. Anybody has a question about how we plan to proceed? Seeing no hands. All right. So let's move on to the agenda for this budget workshop. Ms. Pingree, are there any agenda modifications?
No, ma'am, there are no modifications for the workshop.
All right. Attorney Dawson, citizen comments that were received via email.
Yes, Madam Chair, we did receive a few comments regarding the budget item from the public. And those were distributed to the.
Very good. Moving on to general business. The item for this budget workshop is the draft fiscal year 2021 operating budget and the fiscal year 21-25 capital improvement program for the agency. Mr. Pingree, do you have an introduction for this item?
I do. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to come before you. I'm going to ask that Ms. Ivy pull up the PowerPoint presentation that we have prepared for this as we start to walk you through. The good news, Madam Chair and commissioners, is we've effectively been working, even as an IA board, you've been working since really early in the spring through predominantly the work that you've done with the Office of Economic Vitality to respond to the COVID crisis and to lean into that to assist businesses and nonprofits. So to a certain extent, it's a great preamble for a lot of the information and material that are presented to you today. You have seen much of this before and have actually taken action during the current fiscal year. So you've got a head start with some of the information that you have. Appreciate at the top of this the great guidance that you provided thus far to date and the great assistance under the leadership of the IMC of the respective budget offices, both at the county and at the city. As you know, the local option sales tax is one that is certainly impacted by the economy. It certainly supports the work that we do, but it also plays into city budget and county budget. And so having everybody on the same page for this was a priority from day one. And the added layer of interest, if you will, as we develop your budget plan for the forthcoming fiscal year. All right, so I'm going to walk you through a handful of things. And really before I get into the next slideshow, you can hit the next slide, by the way. There really was 4 things that we had to do. Next slide again. Yeah, this is a good one to talk to. There's really 4 main things that we had to do here. The first one was to update the revenue estimates, given the economic impact that this revenue stream has been experiencing. So that's the first and foremost action that is revealed in the workshop documents. The second thing that this workshop material will cover is the current fiscal year. Okay, so fiscal year 20, and again, you've already really leaned into this subject matter in prior IA board meetings, and that's good. But as you will see, some of the measures we've already taken and that you've already authorized put us in a good position now to have a budget amendment to live within our means during the current fiscal year at the same time that we're moving forward all the various projects that you've already prioritized and given the direction to do, even given the economic downturn. The third thing that we do is we prepare a draft expenditure plan for the next fiscal year 21. So we'll cover that. We'll talk about the impact of the revenue stream and then how the expenditures proposed still fall in line with all the various direction you've already provided us, really with as limited interruption to the planning and toward the construction of projects as is possible. and not getting ahead of ourselves. But I do think, given the challenges, that there is some good news there. And then finally, moving forward over the next 5 fiscal years, you'll get to see your capital improvement program, both on the blueprint infrastructure and on the OED side. Again, this is a bit of there's a lot of information to cover here, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I think we'll do whatever you want. We can stop along the way. I note that as hands come up, we'll be watching for that, Madam Chair. But it may be beneficial to just go through the slide show. So however you want to.
Let's see what you think is best.
Okay. And then also mixed into this, there will be discussion about a county commission approved request for an update to the Fairgrounds study that was approved by the county commission at their annual retreat to be handled by Blueprint. So that's been woven into this as well. Okay, let's go next. Okay, so let's look at the revised revenue estimate. I've covered some of this already, but as you see here and sort of the top takeaways of the slide, again, Commissioners, all of this material is available to the public online. All of it's been distributed 7 days ago to you. We can come back to any of these slides that you may want, but at a high level, what we're really, we have a level of confidence in at this point is that we're looking at an 11% decline in revenues in fiscal year 20. Go back to the last slide. Wasn't quite done with it yet. And that just keeps going forward. There we go. All right. I was going to have to go at a really fast rate. Take a breath. So you're looking at about 11% decline in fiscal year 20, a 10.4% decline in 21. And then we did include some increases, 2.5%. We'll get back to the developing of an estimate moving forward. But you're looking in the 5-year window at about a $20 million reduction for the combined agency, infrastructure and OED being estimated because of the COVID economic related recession. Next slide. So we wanted to give you many of you, if not all of you, experienced the last recession. And we wanted, because we had gone through that experience here locally, it was a good comparative. So what you can see here is just the comparison between the drop-off experience in 2008 through 2016 and the climb back, and then what we're projecting at this point in time for the sales tax revenues, from the COVID experience. And the long and the short of this is we anticipate a more modest decline with a quicker recovery to be experienced from the current COVID pandemic. Next slide. So over 20 years, if you look at playing it out, and again, Commissioners, as I said in many of your briefings, being very conservative this time in how we extrapolate and predict that the sales tax will perform over the next 20 years, of a 1.5% increase rather than 2.5% over that life. We are looking at a $97 million anticipated reduction in sales tax revenues compared with the last forecast that you received back in September 2019 when we were developing the budget of the current fiscal year in 5 years. Yeah. Next slide. So I want you to know that the revenue estimate, even though that's the predicate for everything you have before you, this slide really covers that we continue to monitor this, utilizing all the best data and in collaboration with the city and the county and the state moving forward. And we'll be doing that in real time all through the budget development process in September. Next slide. Okay, so that brings us, so now that we've covered the revenue estimate updates, now we talk about the budget amendment in the current fiscal year. And as I stated earlier, you are, you have experienced a reduction agency-wide, but the good news, I suppose, is that that has largely been factored in the work and your prior actions of the IA within the current fiscal year. So a budget amendment is required to bring the uses of funds into the actual revenue sources that we are experiencing in the current fiscal year. Blueprint Infrastructure is looking at a $3.7 million reduction. OEB is looking at a $1.2 million reduction. Next slide. And this looks at the infrastructure slide side. And the key takeaway here is that, Commissioners, all projects will remain on schedule. Really, the airport gateway, in addition to some of the other operational cuts, which are significant, that we've undertaken to live within our means. The airport gateway project, really from a budgetary perspective this year, became the vehicle for us to be able to utilize, to balance and enact the budget modification. The key takeaway on the airport gateway project is this puts the next steps behind a factor of months, not years. And I want to be very clear about that. You will see as we move forward in the next fiscal year that the airport gateway is fully funded and remains on track. But for the purposes of this, it really became the vehicle to provide that comfort, to make those actions and to keep all projects on schedule. Next slide. So on the OEB side, and as I noted earlier, you've looked at a lot of this earlier in prior IA meetings, but you are looking at a $1.13 million reduction. There's the key takeaway here is we remain poised to move forward with those projects that are gaining life. In other words, we were able to act on the CEDAR grant and the LEAN grant. We remain prepared. I do note that there's a substantial agenda item coming before the County Commission soon in regards to the CARES Act. We will be ready for that. That is not covered in this workshop material, but your staff is prepared for it. And we're ready for word on EDA grants and all the other guidance that you've given. But really, I guess to be similar to the infrastructure side, the key vehicle that has enabled us to be able to live within our means this year has been the reductions that you see noted. And it's also been the convention center, the initial funding that we had allocated for the convention center this year, not proceeding with that, putting that work just behind a matter of months into the beginning of the next fiscal year in October, has really enabled us to meet the COVID crisis and stay ahead of it in terms of providing quality programs and services through OEB to our businesses right now and in the prior months. Next slide. So this is just option number 2. You don't need to act on it at this point, but this lays out very cleanly what the budget amendment for both OEB and Blueprint Infrastructure is. And of course, we'll be ready at the end of the presentation to come back to any questions you may have. Next slide. So that brings us to the infrastructure budget overview. I believe this is where I take a breath and turn it over to Autumn to walk us through the infrastructure for fiscal year 21 in the CIP.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Chair. At a high level, the proposed fiscal year 21 operating budget reflects just over 7% decrease from fiscal year 20. The proposed capital budget provides for the continuation of the active blueprint projects and makes up for the fiscal year 20 amendments that Ben just discussed. We're also recommending spreading out the $100 million bond issuance over fiscal years 22 and 24 to best align with the project implementation schedules and also capture any lower interest rates on the bond if those are still available in the economy. All right, next slide. Thank you. As I mentioned, we have the operating budget decrease. We are maintaining our existing personnel and positions, We do have a reduction in our operating expenses. That's primarily to a reduction in our unclassified professional fees and reductions to travel and training. And it does provide for one new vehicle, which is where you see the the capital outlay line item goes up 36%. That's due to replacing 2 vehicles that we had with one new vehicle. And another truck for the job site. The budget does include, of course, the commitment to do the annual allocation projects. Those are both implemented by all 3, city, county, and Blueprint. The total annual allocation amount is $9.9 million. And as you can see, that remains consistent, that $9.9 million really over the 5-year program, but also over the entirety of the Blueprint 2020 program. Next slide. All right, so for the other projects. First of all, I want to start with the deallocation of completed Blueprint 2000 projects. So we are recommending a deallocation of 5 Blueprint 2000 projects, totaling $1.4 million. And that $1.4 million can go towards the active Blueprint projects that we have now. We're recommending allocations to 10 capital projects, totaling together $19.4 million. Over the 5-year period, 13 projects are recommended for funding with almost $200 million allocated to those 13 projects. Next slide. So we view the Blueprint infrastructure program as a solution to the problem that we have with COVID and the economy. Being able to continue the construction and the infusion of those construction dollars into our local economy and the jobs that they create is certainly a solution. So we looked at our budget and wanted to view it through the lens of how much will we actually have in construction over the near term. So the proposed budget has over $40 million of construction projects within the next 2 years. It creates 5.9 miles of new sidewalks and trails, 4 corridor enhancement projects, 124 acres of recreational space through the creation of 3 new community parks, 6.4 miles from 2 greenways projects, 2 water quality improvement projects, continued investment in the history and culture of our community through the History and Culture Trail, a new trailhead for the St. Mark's Regional Trail, and a new community restroom at FAMUA. While we are facing a $6.8 million shortfall over the next 5 years, we're still putting approximately $200 million of investment into our local infrastructure improvements. An additional $50 million is invested through the city and the county in their annual allocation projects. We also have the $100 million bond spread out over the 2 years to be able to accelerate the airport gateway and the Northeast Connector Corridor Bannerman Road widening projects. And it also includes a $28.5 million low-interest state infrastructure bank loan, or sometimes called a SIB loan, to support the construction of the Northeast Gateway Bellani Boulevard project. I want to highlight 2 capital projects that we've identified for funding through this proposed budget. First is the Magnolia Drive Trail. It includes a request for $1.5 million to complete 2 of the remaining 4 phases. This funding will go towards those 2 phases, phases 1 retrofit and phase 4, which is Monroe to Meridian. So completing the trail from Monroe to Meridian, as well as the undergrounding of the electric utility. But it also allows us to have some budget remaining in the project to be able to support the progress on the future phases up to Appalachian Parkway. I also wanted to identify the funding allocation to the Midtown Placemaking Project, which allows us to move that project into design, but even more so, it builds on the good work that the Capital Region Transportation Planning Agency has done to have a approved concept for the improvements to Thomasville Road through Midtown. All right, and that takes me back to Ben on the Fairgrounds study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a quick slide, and again, commissioners, I think that we can bring this up. There's just one slide on this, but certainly we can talk about it at the end of the presentation. We're getting closer to that point. Just again to reiterate, and I spoke to this at the beginning, You may recall that there was a 2015 market study that was performed about potential North Florida Fairgrounds use. It did not analyze moving the fairgrounds. I do know that that was a concept that came up in some of the briefings, but it did identify a number of things, including, you know, a new exhibition hall, et cetera. The county commission at their retreat requested that the blueprint body investigate and update the market study. Because the prior IA board was not to do the study, that happened in December of 2019. It's not in the attached budget materials. However, as is covered in the analysis of your budget workshop, we anticipate a cost of about $65,000, maybe a little bit more if you wanted it to include analyzing moving the fairgrounds as part of it. And we lay out the funding option for your action later if you do want to do this. Said clearly, reduce the 21 allocation to the Market District project by that same amount. We believe that that would still allow the Market District project to continue on pace, but that's the presentation for this one component. So flag that for later discussion. Next slide, please. Okay, now turn it over to Christina to walk through OEB's preparation and recommendations for 21 fiscal year and the 5-year CIP.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is the presentation on our OEB proposed operating budget and capital improvement budgets for you today. The bottom line is, commissioners, we've been able to balance our budget while decreasing our operating budget for the year, as well as maintaining the direction that you have given us over the course of the last year, and be able to honor those commitments that we have to our local businesses for expanding. Next slide, please. As you can see here, our operating budget has decreased by 7.5%. We're able to maintain our existing personnel, and also we're able to maintain the focus that we've had on local business support and retention. This has been our primary focus over the course of the last 6 months, and really ingrained throughout everything we do, and we're able to continue that going into 21. When you look at our capital projects, next slide, please, Angela. When you look at our draft operating capital project, you see here we have annual commitments for those local business expansions. This includes the project juggernaut incentives that you had approved in January. It builds those over the course of the next 5 years, should we be successful in that project. Allocations for the Tallahassee International Airport and Convention Center. It also decreases funding in our business development fund. We have the expertise on staff to be able to take in-house some of the support mechanisms that Research on Investment had in place regarding magnetic technologies, and we're bringing that in-house here. We've also increased funding to support local businesses, workforce, and MWSBE specific outreach activities, and we've reallocated funding to strategically help market our local businesses, which will in turn help drive some of the business development activities. We have some very successful stories of our local businesses within our targeted areas, and we want to use this funds to be able to communicate that and help drive in business development. Overall, commissioners, Angela, next slide, please. Overall, commissioners, when you look at our 5-year budget, you see funding for $52 million in resources dedicated to help expand our local economy. This includes $44 million for the convention center, 3.5 for the airport, 1.1 for the business expansion and retention incentives allocated through QTI and the targeted business program, and then approximately $2 million for the next 5 years to help with recruitment and local business engagement and workforce development activities. And that concludes the overview of the OEB draft budget for you.
Okay, so thanks. We're almost at the end, commissioners. Next steps, next slide. So as you would anticipate, and staff is about to be done with our presentation now, Today, you have the opportunity to review all this information. We're seeking any input that you may have. You can make any necessary adjustments that you may wish for the proposed budget. We will incorporate all direction that we do receive today and bring that back, making any final adjustments. You have 2 public hearings. There's the normal approval of your budget process, both of them set to occur in September. September 3rd is the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. The 17th is your IA board meeting where this will come back before you for final consideration. I would like to thank one person that you have not heard from yet, but who has been integral and who is on standby with all of us to answer any questions. And that is Trace Long, who has done a great job. He's our, as I've joked with you, either our mini Robert Wiggin or our mini Scott Ross, respectively. And thank him for his work on this today. So, Madam Chairman, Commissioners, we are ready to respond to any questions you may have. I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and please minimize the presentation now.
All right, thank you, Ben, for a great presentation. What I'd like to do is, if you would like to ask a question or speak, if you would use the raise your hand button on your device, we will actually, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to record that you have a question or would like to speak, and then we'll just start to actually go through the list. So go ahead and raise your hand if you would like, when I say raise your hand on the device, or raise your hand. You ready for that, Chase? All right, I see Brian's hand. Commissioner Proctor's hand. Anyone else would like to speak? Commissioner Maddox, did I see your hand? No, okay.
We'll try and keep track, Madam Chair. If you want to start with Commissioner Deloge.
I was going to say, Madam Chair, can we reserve the right to raise our hand later?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with Commissioner Deloge.
Thank you, Commissioner Bryant, or Madam Chair, and welcome to the zoo. I'm glad I'm not in the seat today.
Thank you.
I just want to start by saying, Ben, I got my hats off to you guys. I mean, this is yeoman's work, figuring out a way to pull all this together in light of what's going on. And I would make the motion to accept it under the recommended options 1 and 2, just to start the discussion, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
That's fine. Is there a second? For discussion purposes.
Commissioner Richardson.
All right. Very good. So we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead with comments.
Deloge might still have.
Commissioner Deloge, were you finished? I'm sorry.
I'm done. I yield the floor. I just want to make a motion and thank Ben. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Parker.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Commissioners, I've heard this report, and I'm still not sure where this leaves our North Florida Fairground Association. For Black Lives Matter, a lot of this mattered to me before it became very popular. What I've heard today is Ben say that to offset the $7 million reduction, that the Southside's Airport Gateway project will roll up its sleeve and give blood to offset and to make that sacrifice, even though it's only for by months and not years, according to OEV director. It always occurs to me that when the sacrifices have to be made in these budgeting matters, they typically come from our South End projects first. And if anybody else is required, then that would be much later. I am concerned that the Willani project is both in the $100 million bond and it has a $28.5 million state loan attached. And that's what I look at as going over and beyond. This is very extra and very special treatment that we've identified support not only in blueprint, but we're willing to make a loan beyond blueprint for that northeast side of town. Now, we got some people coming today later asking for some money. I have nothing against FAMU. I love FAMU. But FAMU is a later and more recent ask than is the fairground. Florida State was in that blueprint, y'all, and it was about $22 million for the Madison Mile. But their ask, it exceeds and nearly triples what voters approved. I recognize that our process, it works, except for when it doesn't. Otherwise, it always works. What I'm asking y'all for is that when Commissioner Maddox talked about the fairground, I don't see anything here in my notes except the 2015 recapitulation of what was there. And there's very little. My question, Madam Chair, Commissioners, is we ain't riding with the fairground project. I had suggested before Black Lives Matter that, to me, the fairground should have been included in that bond, 100 million. Again, I say to us, to the maker of the motion, that voters did designate $12 million. And when we began to find $30 million for a state loan and give them some money out the $100 million pile of money, that ain't right. And this item that merely looks at 2015 makes no recommendation. And then finally, Commissioner Richardson, Madam Chair, you all were out there the other day when endless lines of cars came out and walked out the fairground with 39,000 pounds of food. And this is a true truth. I was asked numerous times about the bathroom and where to go. And these were people who worked with the food giveaway, and they came back and said that the lights don't come on, and they came back and said that it's really spooky experience. And those were people not familiar with the South Side, and I guess it was bewildering to them that you could use the bathroom in the dark. And it was not a good feeling as the commissioner of District 1 that we're serving 555 families face mask giveaway, and but it was the best house that I had that could accommodate the giveaway. Are y'all comfortable that we have bathrooms outdoors and they're not representative of the contemporary state of the art, county, city? That's why I'm asking to the maker of the motion that we put $20 million in this bond. And I know that $12 million was reached on probably 2008 guesstimates, but inflation and all the rest of it make that $12 million probably $20 million in today's term. And this is not a study other than to show us what done happened before. I'm asking for some money. I'm asking for the fairground to be included in all this prettified stuff going on across town. Makes me feel real bad. And then we're asking for the Southside Airport Gateway Project to wholly arm out and give up the blood to offset the $7 million. I don't like this. This is not fair. But what I am asking, in spite of the unfairness of it, is that the fairground, to the maker of the motion, I'm asking for the inclusion of fairground to be added into the $100 million bond and push that up to 120 for the people, the good people of our community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, would you just respond to the whole concept of adding that to the bond?
Sure. Well, just quickly, if I understood the question and to be helpful. The motion on the table is for options 1 and 2. First and foremost, Madam Chair, after that motion is, unless there's a modification to it, after the motion is dealt with, there can be further discussion and motion on the fairgrounds. What's in the agenda item actually speaks to updating the study, which would then potentially cover an elevation of that project and lead towards the bonding discussion. I was actually looking where in the 20-year, give me a moment and I'll tell you where it is now, but that hopefully adds some clarity to the conversation.
Commissioner Parker, let me say to you, I will definitely come back for this motion. We can go ahead and get
Madam,
with where we are.
Madam Chair.
One moment.
Okay.
And then we will actually come back and have a specific motion on the fairground. So,
Madam Chair, I understand that what is occurring is still a stepchild's treatment, if you will, and you're asking a special motion if we can come along. And it's been that way a long time, and I'm patient with this practice and habit. So yes, ma'am, I concede to what Mr. Pingree has laid out for us collectively. I just can't breathe.
Just know we are coming back to it. I can promise you that we are coming back to it. Commissioner Minor is next, unless Commissioner Williams thought you are on point for this motion.
I am on point.
Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask Ben, based on our conversation regarding the fairground during our briefing, is now the time to talk about that, or would we want to come back after this? And I wanted Commissioner Proctor to know that he's not the only one who has great feelings for what we like to see happen at the fairground. But is now the time to do that, or after this motion when we have a special discussion about the fairground?
Madam Chair, thank you, Commissioner. The motion on the table does not include the fairground, but the workshop absolutely does. So if it's not dealt with in this motion, after the motion is voted upon, yes, ma'am, there will be time to come back to the fairgrounds and the fairground study issue.
So what we're voting on right now is the update that you provided us to give permission to move forward with what you recommended. That does not include the additional funds that Commissioner Proctor has asked for the fairground.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I have an own point.
Go ahead, Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, ma'am. Ben, you said we could talk about it after, but there is a piece of this motion that could have been added that would affect some piece of moving the fairground forward, correct? So
sure.
If we're having a conversation about the actual bonding piece, wasn't the option number 3 a part of us moving towards that bonding piece that Commissioner Proctor is talking about? So are we saying that we want to reserve the conversation about option number 3 until after options 1 and 2 are taken up? Is that what you're saying?
It is. You could do it either way. There could be modifications or amendments to the motion for any of the various items that you may wish, or if the maker of the motion, the seconder, and board discretion to deal with the option on the table first, you can always then tackle any of the motions, including option number 3. And that would impact, ultimately what you bond, depending on whatever you discuss. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Just more clarification.
Commissioner Minor, thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question and a comment for Christina, if you don't mind. Christina, I saw that you talked about basically taking the magnetic business recruitment funding, reducing that, and then taking that in-house. I understand we're dealing with some very difficult times, and I understand we probably need to make that reduction. When we actually decided, this is about a year ago or longer, about spending those funds to do specialized business recruitment within that industry. I know myself and many others were very enthusiastic about that. because it falls in line with what folks like Gary Ostrander and others were talking about really spending the money up front to recruit those types of businesses, to bring them in and have a really big ROI in future years because of that. My question about that is, because of the pandemic, does it seem like the magnetics industry might have fewer prospects for us being able to recruit businesses to Tallahassee? And the second part of that question is, did you get a chance to get any comments from the magnetic task force, like Ricardo and others about that?
Absolutely, Commissioner. That was our very first stop. We took it to the magnetic task force, talked about the changes that we were recommending in the contract with research on investment. We still have a good portion of that contract in place with them. A lot of the vetting of those initial companies that are coming through. A lot of the, they spent a lot of time marketing and attending trade shows with subject matter experts that they had on staff. We now have that expertise on our team, and we're able to utilize our own staff to be able to help bring those conversations across the finish line. We are still seeing a lot of interest in this area. We're using the Magnetic Capital of the World brand to snag people's interest. And then we're seeing a lot within materials, biotechnology, and you'll hear that in our business development presentation later today.
That's great. Thank you, Christina. I appreciate it. So the task force is comfortable more or less with the situation that we're in and the decision that OAB is presenting to us, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. And your answer is also a good segue to my comment, which was in the coming months and year, I think there may be opportunities for Tallahassee and Leon County to take an additional tack when it comes to recruiting businesses to Tallahassee with the pandemic. And I think, we're looking at possibly months, couple years of this situation that we're dealing with. A lot of businesses around the country will be looking at increasing their remote working, which might lead to new opportunities for OAB to do business recruitment to businesses that may not have been looking at Tallahassee before the pandemic. So I know you all are thinking of this already, but just in the back of your mind, file that away, because if you see opportunities where you might need additional funding from Blueprint to help you with specific business recruiting that would have some really good prospects, let us know. We're going to be very budget conscious over the next several years, right? But there may be cases where an investment in specific business recruitment after the course of the pandemic might lead to some very positive results for us in terms of bringing new businesses to this community. So please keep that in the back of your mind, because I suspect that both I and the other members of the board would be very receptive to that type of thinking.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think next in the queue is Commissioner Lindley.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to drop back to the fairgrounds issue. In December, the board just accepted the status report on the fairgrounds. And then in January, your local county commission approved a strategic plan to update the market feasibility study for the fairgrounds. So we're kind of betwixt and between here on what the county commission has wanted to do as a strategic initiative, and what the Blueprint kind of accepted without too much comment in December. I think it would be wise to go ahead and update that strategic or the overview of the fairgrounds market study and so forth. That's the $65,000 piece. But it seems like if we do want Commissioner Proctor to move ahead, this is a small step, but it would give us an update in today's market, the societal and cultural area, and as well as all of our interest, I think, in doing what we can to advance the economy of the South Side. So I would really like to make a substitute motion, which would include option 3, which would direct our infrastructure program to have a $65,000 beautification and improvements to the fairground project study. So that would be a substitute motion. Commissioner Bryan, or Deloge, Commissioner Bryan, you had 1 and 2, and I would like to add 3. That would be my substitute motion. No.
Is there a second?
Just amend my motion?
Yeah, well, I could amend it.
I'd
If you're willing to amend.
I think that's a fair step if that's
It's
the body's
a
will.
step, it's not the whole distance, but it would give us an update. The last we had was 2015, I think. 5 years ago that we had our last look at that.
Madam Chair, I would accept that as the seconder of the motion. I think it's a prudent step to take before we go talking about bonding millions of dollars without knowing what can be done and when, what the market will bear. I think it's a prudent first step.
And what's gone on in the area in the last 5 years in that market, which is quite a bit.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Are you on point?
Yeah, I am. I'm in agreement and I can support the motion. But my concern is I don't want to keep spinning our tires doing a market study update. I want us to reimagine what we could do at the fairgrounds, what could really happen at the fairgrounds, instead of just knocking dust off of the previous study.
Thank you.
May I? We use on point all the time. I have no idea what it really means, but on point? Yeah.
I'll explain it, but go ahead.
I mean, I know what it means. I know. I just think I think we're fast and loose with it. But the proposal does suggest beautification and improvements. It's not just strictly what the market is, but it would, I think, get us some ideas on what is possible out there, to your point, Diane Williams-Cox. I agree with you. I mean, we don't want just numbers. We want to get some ideas, some creativity.
So now we have,
point.
Thank you so much. We have 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to continue though with comments. Commissioner Matlow, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It occurs to me as we're having this conversation about a new plan that a lot of these sales tax initiatives go back to 2014 when this discussion started. And it seems like now that we're at a time where we can spend the money and deliver on some of the things we promised at the voters, now we need a new plan. And I'm wondering, how long are we going to plan for, and when are we actually going to do something? So when we look at the fairgrounds, the CRTPA is currently involved in what's been coined the super roundabout in front of the fairgrounds, essentially saying this is an area that we're trying to get cars past more quickly, not an area where we're trying to uplift that area to be a destination district. And so when I look at what we've experienced the last 2 years, it only took a couple of months to completely change the Northeast Gateway project and get that all the way to Roberts Avenue. When I look at the fact that we have a $53 million convention center project, when we had a $20 million commitment to build the exact same facility. And that took 1 week to get $33 million. And then I hear Commissioner Proctor say, people don't have a place to go to the bathroom. And I'm just at a loss for words of what we're exactly doing here. I hear, that's a lot of tons of millions of dollars to spend. We need more plans, but we didn't need more plans when Florida State wanted 33 million extra dollars. And in this budget conversation, what we're being told here is that this is the first year that we've started collecting sales tax for 20 years, and we're pretty much out of money. We've already spent 20 years of money in the first couple weeks of this sales tax. So it takes me back to wondering, that's just kind of the normal conversation of why can't we get some bathrooms? Why can't we deliver upon that project? But the bigger conversation is, We're in the middle of a pandemic. We've seen Orange County cancel their convention center project, taking note that we don't know the future of convention centers, what the demand will be, and taking note that local businesses may be suffering. I'm not saying we need to pull the plug on anything at this moment, but I am saying we need to allow for flexibility. 3 months from now, we may be in a situation where we're forcing businesses all across the city to close down against their will to get this pandemic under control. And we're not allowing ourselves the flexibility or the resources to be able to address that. And I think that's the most urgent thing on the horizon in the next 6 months. Whereas a convention center, we know that there's no immediate demand for that because people aren't going to be gathering and we don't know exactly when they will be gathering next. And when I think nobody voted for an extra $33 million for a convention center when they went to the ballot, you know, there was a conversation of $20 million. And what we got was, we got snookered. We were told we would get a full convention center for $20 million. And then the other party came to the table and said, I don't have any money. Can I have yours? We said, we don't have any money. So we said, hey, we'll borrow it. We'll add an extra $13 million. And now we're at $53 million. And we're stuck on whether we need a new plan to get bathrooms at the fairgrounds. So I guess my question is, let's put some bathrooms at the fairgrounds. Let's get that done. And then we can have the bigger plan about, are there other changes coming to the fairgrounds? But to have people go and use those services, I don't see how we can continue down that path, because we hear a lot about, we need a convention center, we need to move forward. But moving forward always seems to be about the people who already have resources and are already well off. And there's people that are in need right now. How can we move forward before people have a bathroom to go to? This is just outrageous. So I'd like to hear other comments, but then also want to bring up the vote on the Bragg Stadium. You know, I think that was pushed forward for $10 million, and we'll hear about it later, but it's not included in this budget. And there's obviously not enough money left over if we do adopt this budget as it stands. So I would be looking to say, let's include the $10 million for Bragg. Let's look at the bathrooms for the fairgrounds, put it all together and have staff come back and figure out the numbers and how to make all those projects work. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know you're taking questions on point. I'm seeing Commissioner Delogio's hand up, so I'm not sure if you had something there or if you'd like me to keep going, Madam Chair.
Are you on point, Commissioner Deloge?
No, I'll wait. Just put me in the queue. Thank you.
You're in the queue, sir.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and well done for I guess we're almost at an hour now, first hour of your meeting. I want to say first and foremost, great job by the staff. This is robust analysis, looking at our reserves, looking at Blueprint $2,000, everything else you've satisfied, you've been able to fill a lot of these gaps already before we get to other discussions. So thank you for that hard work. I also noted in our briefing, and just want to say it here, that several years ago, I'm thinking 6 or 7, we were really struggling to get good collaboration between CRTPA, Blueprint, FDOT, others, and this item just, to Autumn, your team, I mean, just incredible collaboration, and I really appreciate that. I think that helps us leverage extra dollars and move projects forward, even when we hit a tough time like this. So thank you. So for me, Madam Chair, I'm picking up a few lines out of the budget item, and I think with some of the comments that have already been made, this is an interesting point for us because we're looking at the first phase of reductions because of the COVID pandemic. And yet we're saying in the item, it is impossible to know the full impact of COVID-19. We're already seeing businesses impacted again just in recent weeks with a surge. So I also have a concern about locking us in today to any decisions, either in the budget discussion. I know this is coming back in September, but also our discussion about new projects during our regular meeting. And I would just like to hear others' thoughts about the optional August budget workshop. Ben, I think you noted that in the item that there was a placeholder for August budget workshop. And it would make me feel more comfortable potentially moving forward with some of these items if we got another chance to look at the budget in August and think about any other revenue shortfall or anything like that. Still, we probably won't know the full extent. So that's just a general comment. Before I get into any of the projects or anything like that, I want to go to one of our staffing issues. I very much respect our staff who has been working double time for a long time. They've been working on 2020 and 2000 projects. And during this last few months, particularly for OEV, but I know for Blueprint as well, we have helped keep businesses going. So when I see us zeroing out COLA, cost of living expenses, I'm really troubled by that. And I wanted to start there just by saying that both commissions, individuals on both commissions, we have championed protecting our state employees every year in our legislative priorities. We take care of city and county employees. I'm not sure what the city's doing on this, but I know the county's going to retain COLA this year. And we have invested a tremendous amount in our staff in recent years. So while I appreciate the effort to sacrifice on your own behalf, if that's where this came from, to get the budget in the right place, my gut feeling here is that this may not be that much money. And I would really love to see us add COLA back in for next year. All of our employees, all Blueprint and OEV employees are dealing with the same challenges as everybody else. So Ben, here's a question, and I don't know who to direct it to, but I'm going to give it to you first. I noted, this is on page 32, it says personnel expenses have been budgeted at a 4.81 or $59,000 reduction compared to 2020. And so the $59,000 reduction is both COLA and salaries and benefits that were anticipated for new hires but aren't needed now. This is only OEV. So am I reading this correctly to think that a portion of that $59,000 is all we needed for COLA this year? And if we extended that to Blueprint infrastructure, I didn't see that number in the item. It could, I'm wondering what the amount of COLA is so we can take up this question.
Madam Chairman, Commissioner, and all commissioners, first and foremost, thank you for your comments. And on behalf of our team, it really is a pleasure to work on the subject matter and under the policy guidance that you give. So wherever the conversation goes, thank you. Thank you for that. And know that your team, we really love the work that we do. The answer to your question, written easily, I guess, or as easy as it gets, is it is about it's just over $30,000 for both OEV and Blueprint infrastructure for each % of COLA that you would want to do. That's the simplest. That's the simplest math on it. And I'll leave it at that. We're obviously happy to answer any questions as we move forward. But
thank you, Ben. One more question on this particular piece. For each percentage, so I know Social Security Administration sets a percentage for COLA. Do we normally follow that percentage? I think it was rounded down recently. Or has it normally been a 3% COLA or something like that? Where were we for FY20, for example?
I believe we were at an average of 3%, if I'm not mistaken. We normally follow either the county or the city. County and city usually do tend to track each other in terms of what they or what you put in for your respective budgets, and we usually will follow that. And I think it is inclusive of the analysis that you just spoke to, Commissioner, following the federal rates of inflation.
Okay, so worst case for 3% is going to be $90,000. We're talking. Okay, we're talking about pretty big numbers here, and Commissioner Deloge, I almost said Mr. Chair. I could pause here and take up, this issue particularly, but I'm wondering if we could have this as a friendly amendment to your motion. And Madam Chair, I'm willing to pause and hear any other thoughts about COLA before I ask a couple other questions, if you'd like. But Commissioner Deloge, would you accept that as a friendly amendment to add in COLA and in the normal scheme, matching city or county?
Yes. What was the number again, Ben? 30,000?
It's 30,000 per percent of COLA. So, 2% would be just over 60, 3% would be over 90. That's the estimate for both.
And that tracks to the city and the county right now, the way that.
Right now, it tracks to the city at 0 in terms of what the city has put forward for their next budget cycle. And 3% would be, I believe, what the county's proposal is. So right now, as it stands in your book, and with the motion on the floor, if not amended, it's at a 0% COLA for the year ahead.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay.
And your second, Commissioner Deloge, your second? Would that be Commissioner Richardson?
Yeah.
Yes, and I couldn't accept that, Commissioner Dozier, in light of the fact that we're not offering our city employees any raise at all.
Well, okay, Commissioner Richardson, I noted in the paper that you all were doing a hiring freeze and no raises, things like that.
No, we're not doing a hiring freeze.
I'm sorry,
we're not doing a hiring freeze.
I have not read your budget. I saw it in the paper. I've seen a lot of comments.
Yeah, they got that.
I thought it was reported that I didn't realize you weren't doing COLA. That kind of surprises me, but I will say for county employees, we're doing COLA, and regardless of what your decision is, we all have budget challenges, so I'm not going to speak out of turn to the city's decision. My feeling that we need to protect our investments and protect our employees at Blueprint and OEB stands. So I will make a subsequent motion or I can second, I'm sorry, the motion on the table if you're not willing to, if the maker is prepared to accept this amendment.
So
I think you have to make, go ahead.
What I think we need to do, and I'm going to probably defer the mayor's second, but I think what we might want to do, Commissioner Dozier, is to finish with these 3 recommendations, which is really all that we have in this motion. It's been amended already. There is no second on what your amendment to Commissioner Deloge's motion. So if we could, and let me turn to the attorney and make sure I'm not off track. Can you?
What we have is Commissioner Deloge's motion, which Commissioner Lindley proposed a substitute motion, and then Commissioner Dozier wanted to add a friendly amendment. Doesn't look like that was supported, so we really do need to resolve the substitute motion.
No, actually, if I can.
I didn't have a substitute.
The substitute, there was no substitute at the end of the day, and I caught it. So right now, the option on the table is 1, 2, and 3. That's the motion and the second. What was just discussed was a friendly amendment to involve COLA. The maker of the motion was amenable. The second was not, and that's where you're at right now.
That's what I'm asking. Which means what? If there is if the second person does not accept, then
there are two things, and you can correct me here. There are 2 mechanisms that could occur. Okay. The second could withdraw their second, and somebody else could second it, or as we're saying, you could try to dispense with the motion on the table and then come back to COLA or what have you later.
That makes more sense instead of having 14 things on it. Yeah.
All right. Well, Madam Chair.
On point. If we dispense with the motion, doesn't that approve the budget? If we approve the budget, you can't go back and add COLA afterwards. It would have to be included in the motion or substitute motion.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, any further action that you would take during this workshop, we would seek the guidance and find clarity of where to take that from and incorporate it into the development of your final budget document.
Okay.
All right,
so
Madam.
Motion, you still have to prove.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will come back to this. I mean, I'm inclined to have a budget, motion altogether. I thought COLA was very appropriate for personnel and operating expenses that are critical to those decisions. So I really hope we can get full support after this motion.
Commissioner Dozier, before you go further, could I ask everyone else to mute your mics because we're getting feedback? Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. So for the other part of this, I wanted to come back to a question Commissioner Minor asked of Christina, actually. You're talking about the magnetic task force and whether or not they're comfortable with the position that we're in and the decisions we're making today. And then Commissioner Minor talked about future recruitment efforts for companies that may be moving virtual. And Christina, we've talked about it in briefing. I'm glad you brought it up today. There's movement on, MAG task force and recruiting those businesses, but also biotech and others. I'm very excited about the progress we've made and what you're letting us know about the contacts and the referrals you're receiving. So when the MAG task force says, or we could ask about the EVLC, that they're comfortable with the decisions we're making today, was there any discussion about if we decide to move forward with Convention Center, even a portion of Bragg Stadium, Alabama Street, and others, reducing the ability of OEV to do anything else in future years? If we're looking at around $4 million right now left over before we even talk about Bragg or Alabama Street, I'm just wondering what the sense from our business advisors, MAG Task Force and EVLC, is about the types of programs we have, the flexibility that we may need to respond to things in the future, and if this came up in their discussion.
Madam Chair, I think, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And you did note the updated analysis of what would be left over. And I'm going to turn it to Christina here in a minute, because I think your question was actually probably for her in regards to what she's hearing from the stakeholder group and the EVLC and et cetera.
Madam Chairman, point of information, this is not germane to the motion, and you told us today that you want us to talk to what's germane.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Proctor, this is about the budget. So
what's being asked is not germane to the motion. No parts of it, either 1, 2, or 3.
Madam Chair, this is a core of our budget discussion, is how much money we have and where we allocate it. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am.
The question was what?
Pivot very quickly to Christina to respond to your question, please. Christina?
Commissioner, we are confident in seeing opportunity within our business development sector. Your budget that's presented in front of you begins at your workshop on March 12th. We talked about the establishment of a competitive projects fund as well as a future leveraging opportunity fund. This budget before you does establish the initial seeds of those funds. In 21, $25,000 has been set aside to seed the competitive project fund. That would be topped out at $2.5 million. that would allow us to incentivize companies regarding land, infrastructure, R&D, development of a workforce pipeline, and as well as the future leveraging opportunity funds. That would allow the IA board to seize upon project opportunities that aren't currently in your budget. Policies governing these two funds are on your general IA agenda.
Oh, thank you, Christina. I understand that. Those are all the opportunities if we can get more funds into those two new tools in our toolbox, right?
Correct.
And I really appreciate the fact that you all went ahead and finished the policy development for the competitiveness fund for both of them, even though we can only seed the fund with 20,000 this year. Project Juggernauts, was that one? How much was in the incentives for? I'm sorry, that was QTI and other things. That may not be a one-to-one, but 20,000 isn't a incentive necessarily that could attract a number of different businesses and meet those different issues, opportunities that you just articulated. That would be too little and wouldn't go far enough. Is that fair?
It would all depend on the scale of the project at that point in time and what that particular company is seeking.
If we committed the remaining $4 million or so that we might have to brag to others, we would not necessarily be able to increase that amount in the future if revenues stay depressed for another 5 years. Is that correct? We may be limited in our opportunities to recruit businesses or support local businesses.
Christina, let me take a approach at this if it's helpful. I am following your train of thought, and you're right. Commissioners, you have a finite amount of resources available to you. What we do is take your policy direction, as you know, and then we lay that out per an implementation schedule that you've approved, per a series of policies that you've approved, with oversight mechanisms that you've approved and audited annually as you oversee, within the projection of the funds that we may have. What this documentation and the update of the revenue has presented to you is that if you would have asked the question, and you did, by the way, ask this question back in March, okay, staff, after everything we've already done, the juggernauts, and the question was made at the time of raising the amount for a convention center. You asked how much money is left over for anything else, whether it's for any of these funds, QTI, TVP, to get Amazon, to do Juggernaut Part 2 or whatever. And the answer then was 14 million. Because of the revenue estimate update as is laid out in your material, the current answer to that same question is 4 million. But as you noted, Commissioner, and thank you, Christina, as you noted, we have an agenda item moving forward that that the IA board had asked for that lays out a policy for however much money may go into that fund and into the future based on how the economy performs. I hope that's helpful and answers your question.
It absolutely did. These meetings are tough for all of us. We're making a lot of difficult and very important decisions. But Madam Chair, I hope you'll forgive me from saying that I'm really getting concerned that we don't have the bandwidth to talk about these bigger questions. We're talking about doing another feasibility study for the fairgrounds, all of these other projects. There are merits to all of them, but I'm reflecting on the Village Square conversation this week about minority businesses. It was a phenomenal conversation. And Commissioner Deloge, you were there, and Commissioner Williams-Cox, Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. It was a great conversation. But the ability to lift all boats, to invest in small businesses and entrepreneurs and others will be gone. And I think Commissioner Matlow said this a few minutes ago. What I'm seeing is a proposal to spend 20 years worth of sales tax money in our very first year. I'm not saying these projects aren't without merit, but we have gone from 14 million to 4 million remaining for the next 20 years in just a few short months. So I think all of these discussions are good. I don't want to lock anything in today. That's why I said I'd like to come back in August for that workshop. We need to be careful. And if we can't attract businesses, build businesses, and meet a lot of these other needs, we're going to be, I think, not meeting what our strategic plan says and not meeting what we promised our constituents. And quite bluntly, 5, 10, 15 years from now, when commissioners sit here and have this discussion, they're going to be working with nothing. They're just going to be, kind of having programs that may have 100,000 or a couple 100,000 in them. That'll be good. But we are losing opportunities that we don't even know yet. And I am concerned about that. So this is absolutely the core of our budget discussion. And with that, I'll turn it over and hear what some of the other comments are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Daley.
First of all, Dr. Bryant, you're doing a fine job as our new chairwoman, and I certainly do appreciate it. It's a good meeting. We're having a great conversation. And if I could take a point of personal privilege, I know he's watching. And Jimbo, we wish you the best in your family, and we wish you a speedy recovery so you can get back to business with us. We're all thinking about you. I want to thank staff for a tremendous briefing and putting together this budget. I'm comfortable with where we are, knowing that we revisit the budget every year. That's why we revisit the budget every year, is because the budget can change and we can modify from year to year. We saw the success of that during Blueprint 2000, and here we are on the second generation of the penny, and I do believe that the process does work. I want to thank Commissioner Lindley for giving, the reason why I put my hand up was to ask questions about where's the county's position and to kind of educate me on the discussion that y'all had at your retreat in regards to the fairgrounds and the study. And Mary Ann, you answered all my questions and I do appreciate it. I too am interested in the study of the fairgrounds, specifically to use your words, to get a little creative and see what we can do there. As we move forward. I've made it very clear that I am in favor of redeveloping the fairgrounds. I'm very comfortable with the motion that's on the table for options number 1, number 2, and number 3, and look forward to support it. I don't plan on ringing back in, so I'll go ahead and speak to the item on the raises. And I want to look, all my friends in the face that are on staff. Look, we're in a difficult situation at the city. And I know you understand that. And Commissioner Dozier, you are absolutely correct that we all are dealing with the recession and the pandemic in different ways. And at the city, we made the commitment yesterday not to increase taxes, but as a result, we have a $25 million hole that we're trying to plug. Our difficult position, if we move forward, voting in favor of cost of living adjustment for the Blueprint IA, is having to turn back around and look at every single city employee, as Commissioner Richardson duly noted, that right now is not currently in the city budget. And I don't think that any one of you questions how much we value staff. I look forward to hopefully maybe next year or the following year, possibly making up for this financial year as well. But it is going to be very difficult for those of us at the city that are not currently supporting any type of raise, period, for our employees to be able to vote in favor of providing raises on the other governmental boards that we sit on because of parity and making sure. And I appreciate where everyone is coming on this item. I hope everyone understands how difficult this is as well. For the city commission. I mean, this is unprecedented time. So look, I think this is one, we'll just take the vote. Let's all just respect where we are in our positions and see where the votes fall. But Ben, I know on a personal note, I've known you since college and we've got a great staff. And I think that you appreciate the difficult situation that we're in at the city. It's nothing personal, obviously, but it's just, it's where I am. So Madam Chair, thank you. I will go ahead and mute, and I do support the motion on the table. And it is good to see everybody, even if it is a Zoom call.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor, I think the next person is Commissioner Richardson.
Oh,
and he's
okay.
the last person I have in mind.
All right. I didn't know if you'd seen my hand waving.
Yes, sir.
The first thing that I want to make many of you aware of, some may not, some may, but as a member of the Sales Tax Committee, I advocated for $10 million in the sales tax extension for improvements to the fairgrounds. So I don't know where that is over the next 20 years. I know it's not a part of the 5-year priority, but that was agreed to by the Sales Tax Committee and was approved by the voters, $10 million. I guess the question that I have, because at our last meeting, we got word from the chair of the Fairgrounds Committee that all of this discussion was being had about the fairgrounds, but nobody had had any discussion with them. And so I want to know, has there been any discussion about the Fairground Authority and their interest in all of this? And because they're going to play an important role in this if we're able to do anything. But no, we're talking about them and around them, but I want to know if anybody's talking to them. We can have all the studies in the world, and if they say, no, we're not interested in, we've got this long-term $1 a year contract, and we're going to exercise it for every year that we have it. We can have the most beautiful study in the world. We can bond $10 million, but if they say no, none of that is worth a hill of beans. So is anybody talking to them about their interest in moving the fairgrounds, improving the fairgrounds? Because I haven't heard that yet. But what's important, I did want you all to know that there was $10 million approved in the sales tax extension for improvements to the fairgrounds, because I personally advocated that with the support of Henry Martin, who was also a member of the committee. So, Madam Chair, if somebody could answer that question, I'd love to hear it.
Yes, sir. I have two people that want to answer, and Commissioner Deloge, your hand has been up, and then Commissioner Proctor.
Madam Chair, I've been in the queue for a while too, but if I can speak on point to Commissioner Richardson's question,
yes,
I have had conversation with the fairground and their board, and they are looking for the same type of improvements. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, when we had the conversation last time and I asked for the study, one of the key parts to what I asked for was that the fairground be included in the conversation about the study, and their take being placed within the study as well as to what the feasibility would be. So my expectation is that the study include the fairground board and what their vision is of the fairground, if there is even an option there to move. But I do want to make sure, since you brought up the question, Commissioner Richardson, that staff understands that to be the direction that I gave at the previous meeting when we had this conversation about the study.
Commissioner Proctor, are you on the same point?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, sir.
Commissioner Richardson, thank you. And you've been an advocate for that fairground, and I bumped into Ms. Henry Martin with a group of ladies at TED's 3 weeks ago before TED shut down. And we're still talking years later about that fairground, and she mentioned the advocacy for it. I've talked to fairground executive director, Mr. Harvey, and yes, he's interested in bathrooms. He's interested in water fountains, appropriate facilities that would bring the fairgrounds up to, he's not against it. Mr. Harvey has indicated that if the fairground is to move, their interest is simply in being made whole. I don't know what whole means, but that was his standard. No problem about going any place. He's never been adverse, hostile, and indifferent, aloof. he doesn't care as long as they're made whole and given comparable options to do what they do. And therefore, we've proceeded with a conversation knowing very of his gentle spirit, but supportive. But in terms of our upgrade to the location where he is, he would very much appreciate appearing on somebody's radar. His office has air conditioning. Building B, sometimes it does, but he will welcome our support to improve. But I wanted just to say also, in addition, Madam Chair, that as I look at the project list, and I think Commissioner Richardson, you all put $12 million.
Was it 12?
Not, yes, sir, 12 million,
Okay.
not 10. That's about the only item I know what y'all did do on that list. When I look at number 53, which is the Southside Gateway project, we have absolutely zeroed out until 2025. There's nothing there. Project 55, the Orange Avenue, Adams to Spring Hill, there's not a dollar in sight, not a dime can be found. The Fairgrounds beautification project number 68, and I'm on page 75, there's nothing but blank space there, nothing. And even we've chosen to withhold support for what I thought Mayor Daley had a strong interest in some years now for Northeast Park, which is project number 69, and it too, there's not a dollar committed. I just don't know how we galvanize the support and project to people a project list that all of this is coming to your side of town. And then when we get down to the hardcore, let's write the checks. And ladies and gentlemen, it takes a magnifying glass, which I have, to look at these teeny weeny numbers. But I'm telling you, 53 was a lie. 55 is a lie. 68 is a lie. And I don't know what we told 69 on the Northeast Park, but we told people that they were going to get some money. Madam, I don't know how you all feel to lie to just one side of town. And then when you look at the advanced fund, let's go up to the advanced funding projects. And when you go to advanced fund, there's big old, suck all the money. Gateway, Northeast Gateway, Willani Boulevard, $5.1 million allocated in the prior years. And they got money all the way across the page. See that right there? As a commissioner, I'm not the at-large, but if I was the at-large commissioner or something like that, I would just think that, wow, all these blank spaces and these other folk up there just and then some of these folk is getting money that was not even budgeted in the voted on. And those are a couple of things down the road today. So, when we really with hollow talk and tongue, talk about the disparity in development, the disparity. There's a disparate difference. And Commissioner Richardson, you want 2 pennies. This thing right here have missed 2 pennies that the name of Fairground been on the ballot. And here we about to spend it all. And we're talking about the $65,000, which is not 12 million or even 20 million to do what we promised. And it just appears that either our staff is against the development of the South Side, or either commissioners are telling our staff offline that don't do anything for it, because clearly it's a winner. It's in the heart of the area. It don't have bathrooms indoors. It's just not like the rest of the community. And except for Bragg Stadium, there's no place that I know that's comparable to the restroom facilities of the fairground. And that's just the true truth. So, Madam Chair, I thank you very much. I think that the $65,000 does not go far. I'm asking, I know Commissioner Lindley wanted to do another study, but let's look at a couple of things here. I saw that the Buckhead homeowners, Madam Chair, we did a Willani Boulevard alternative noise study, February in 2020. It was a technical memorandum, 2020. We did another study and spent this much money for the Northeast Gateway Wilani Boulevard project development and environmental study that was prepared for the Buckhead Homeowners Association of Tallahassee. That was April 21 on 2020. So, you know, I feel like BS is going on because in this same book, money being spent on Wilani left and right, and their name is on all these little teeny weeny lines with money, and the rest of it is not. So it's in our hands, and I believe that that the motion, is there a substitute motion on, Madam Chair?
Yeah, we have a substitute motion that has been accepted by,
No, it's not a
an
substitute.
amended motion. I'm sorry, we have an amended motion, not a substitute.
Madam Chair, I believe that with all the things that have been said, I offer a substitute motion that carries with it the $12 million plus the $65,000 for a study for the fairground, and that $100 million bond simply accommodate something in the South Side that's fair, right, and honest to all balanced sides of the taxpayers who paying for it. That's my motion. All things left status quo, with the exception of the $12 million we put in that $100 million bond for the completion of a fairground project, which otherwise out to 2025 has not a dollar committed to it to improve anything out there.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Parker?
Madam Chair.
One minute.
Ma'am.
Would you restate, would you just restate it? You're breaking up in here. I didn't get it all.
Okay. Yes,
Just
ma'am.
restate your motion.
A substitute motion that looks at everything intact from the previous motion with the addition of the $12 million that has been designated to the fairground, and that it might be included in this $100 million bond, or either treated the same way as Wilani, a $12 million state loan for its improvement and transformation, and keeping other things status quo.
Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
All right, so we have a substitute motion that reads, Madam Attorney?
As I understand it, the substitute motion is to add the $12 million for the fairgrounds to be included in the fiscal year 22, fiscal year 24 bonding for the Milani project.
Let me piggyback. The way I understood the substitute motion was options 1, 2, and 3, with the addition of $12 million, be direct staff to include $12 million in the 5-year CIP, which includes the bond issuance for the fairgrounds project. Is that accurate, Commissioner Brocker?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Is that accurate,
Yes.
Seconder? Okay.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Question, all those in favor, please vote. Well, let's go, roll call vote, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
I've been waiting to speak, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it on that motion? I'm sorry, Commissioner Close. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's generic to this motion, I think, certainly. I wanted to piggyback on some of Commissioner Richardson's comments. The fairgrounds is an authority. We've got money set aside. We voted on it. It's prioritized. It's in the pecking order. We can't just start moving stuff around like Topsy. If the fairgrounds needs better bathrooms, then the authority needs to figure out how to do that. We are not, they can't, I mean, if he wants to write us a letter and say, we're broke and we're going to acquiesce control, and would you fix our bathrooms? Maybe. But he's a separate entity from us. And so until we take the whole thing over, and we did this once before, 10 years ago, it was an act of Congress. We had property under contract across from the flea market. We were going to move the fairgrounds and we were going to do this. And when we got down to the actual financial part of it, the cost to move those metal buildings blew the whole thing up. So
That's not true.
we got to be a little bit more methodical and a little bit more sensitive to how this works. So let's take the bathrooms off the table, and I'm okay with doing the update, the study, as Commissioner Lindley added. That's fine. On FSU, completely separate issue. Let's be honest here. We changed the arrangement because of the fact that FSU is going to pay for the lifetime of this project any shortfall. Convention centers across this country perennially are money losers. We looked at it and said, we can go halvesies on the front end and we can split the ongoing loss, or we can go all in on the front end and walk away. And we are guaranteed that's as far as we go. The universities in this state don't get PICO money like they used to, so their ability to bring a capital money in was hard. We could do that, and we have no responsibility after that. FSU manages, maintains, it's a community asset. So I just want to make sure people are being intellectually honest about how this lays out. Anyway, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I think the motion that's on the table does not include doing bathrooms, just so we're all on the same.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's what I was saying. It's not, that's a whole lot of bathrooms for $12 million.
So I'm ready to receive the vote. I think that we're there. I call the question. Any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a quick question of clarification. This would affect the amount of bond. Is this increasing the amount of bond, or is this keeping the 100 million the same amount and just putting this 12 million within that? That's one part of it. The second part of it is, I'm going to be very interested later in bonding or seeing about getting the 10 million for Florida A&M University for their stadium, for Bragg Stadium. And so how does this fit into that conversation as well? I mean, if we make these budgetary moves right now, are we also able to later add that $10 million in to be accommodated? I don't want to take that vote without having those questions answered. Madam Chair, thank you.
Madam Chair.
The vote is just on the substitute, right?
Right.
This is a substitute motion, and I think that Ben would like to respond to him first.
Okay, so a couple things. Yes, this is on the substitute motion, and I'm sure the chair will ask that it be restated right before the vote, given all the good conversation that's happening. First and foremost, the question was on the level of the bond, and I am going to be looking to the maker of the motion to keep me on point here or in line with the motion. I interpret it to signify adding the Fairgrounds project to the bond issuances within the next 5 years and playing that out over the 20-year cycle, bringing that analysis back to you on that implication. As you may recall from your bonding discussion, you did not, at the time you gave the direction for the $100 million bond, you did not go to your full bonding capacity. You have capacity. If that is not what you want to do, then when we came back, you would have to talk about what you wanted to remove from the $100 million. I interpret the motion to be adding the Fairgrounds to the 100 and just moving the Fairgrounds up effectively in the prioritization. The second component had to do with Commissioner Maddox's question about bonding potentially for a FAMU project. The good news, I suppose, is the answer is this does not impact that because they're from two different funding streams. The Fairground project is from infrastructure. Any bond for the FAMU project, as I understand the FAMU project, would come from the economic development funding. That is the component and the portion that I spoke to Commissioner Dozier earlier's question. That was the $4 million that remained. That only that economic development 12%. The Fairgrounds is in the infrastructure component. So if that's all okay, that's what I hear.
All right, very good. Commissioner Maddox, does that answer your question?
But I have one follow-up question. Is there anything, Ben, that precludes us from making that motion about the fairground? I'm sorry, about Bragg Stadium right now? Is there a reason we have to take it up later?
It ain't on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda. It's on the meeting agenda.
That's fair. Okay, that's fine. All right.
That's
Very good.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner, I think I'll be right to you, Commissioner Dozier. I think Commissioner Williams-Cox, I cut her off before. Did you have?
Ben cleared it up because that was the way I understood it, that FAMU had nothing to do with Fairgrounds.
Okay, very good. Nice comment on the substitute motion, Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, ma'am. So Ben, if I just heard you correctly, if this motion were to pass, the bonding would come within the next 5 years. So in normal circumstances, I think we get an agenda item that shows us what the cost of that bond is, because it's going to be a whole lot more than 12 million with the debt service and everything like that. So you would have to come back to us with those numbers, but if this motion were to pass, you would have direction to go and start looking into that. Is that correct?
That is correct. As early as your budget public hearing, we would look to update the 20-year prospectus for the entire fund, given a bond issuance for this to be included in the next 5 years. We'd lay out what the implications with debt service were, and we'd play that out over the full 20 years, and we'd bring that back to you in September.
Okay.
As early as September, yeah.
So we're in the first year of our sales tax. We've added new roads, we've expanded projects, we've added underground utilities, we've added a tremendous amount. I'm just going to keep reiterating my same thought. If we spend all of our money or commit it all in the first 1 to 5 years, we're going to be really challenged in the future. And so I can't support this motion with the addition. I could have gotten there with the study and maybe look at some options, but Commissioner Deloge and Commissioner Richardson have said, we've been through this a lot. We had plans to move it when I first came on the commission. And I think this is a step too far given where we are today. And Madam Chair, I'll just use this opportunity to let you know, I know our regular meeting is going to start in 10 minutes, but I still would like an opportunity to make my motion as requested. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and vote on the substitute motion. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Somebody taking, okay. We'll do the city side first. Mayor Daley.
Aye.
Madam Chair Bryant.
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Aye.
Okay, county side. Commissioner Deloge.
No.
Commissioner Proctor.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Minor.
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier.
No.
Commissioner Lindley.
No.
Commissioner Maddox.
Aye.
Give us a moment.
And for those who are watching, there's a calculation that has to take place to determine whether there's a majority. Funniest thing to me.
I can almost assure you I think it fails because it didn't pass on the county side, but I'm waiting for an answer.
I'm hoping that doesn't happen this time. That's what happens most of the time. We're hoping that didn't happen this time. Unfortunately, Jimbo's not here to help us. Thinking about you, Jimbo.
The motion passes.
Motion passes. Back to you, Commissioner Dozier.
Mute your mics.
Mute their mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just as a reminder, cost of living increases, as Ben said earlier, 30,000 for both Blueprint infrastructure and no EV staff, up to 3%. So this is a cap of 90,000. And Mayor Daley, I took note of your comments earlier. I truly do understand the challenge that we're all facing this year. County's looking at a $10 million shortfall, and considering the size of our budget, that is certainly comparable to what the city's looking at, and I feel your pain. Because, and this is how you and Commissioner Richardson framed this, that it puts the city in a difficult position if Blueprint staff gets COLA and your staff does not. I'm troubled by that because it puts us in a difficult position if county staff gets COLA and Blueprint or other staff that works just as hard does not. So I respect that concern, but I think this is a different budget, a different funding source. Blueprint's not in the same position, thankfully, as the city or county at this point. So I'm very hopeful that all of my colleagues, we will look at this in light of Blueprint exclusively. We have the money. If we have the money to do a fairground study, we've got up to 90,000 to take care of our hardworking employees and retain the talent we've invested in. So I'm going to make a motion for up to 90,000 for COLA to be adjusted and presented back to us at the next budget workshop.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Properly moved in second. Let's go roll call.
Just a comment on that, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I would just say our budgets are in different positions as we look at what we're doing right here in the Blueprint budget based on the hard choices we have to make on our city budget and those deficits. But I mean, the real choices we made, adding, $33 million extra dollars to the convention center project and those sorts of things, we are really just talking about $90,000. Obviously, $90,000, it's a whole lot more to give a COLA to the entire city staff than $90,000. But for these employees, we have it in our budget. They've been working hard. They've been working extra hard because of COVID and trying to make all these adjustments. And I think if we can do it, there's no reason we shouldn't. So supporting the motion.
Madam Chair.
Any other comments? Yes.
Madam Chair, I appreciate that how hard this staff has worked. I do not deny that. But at the City of Tallahassee, our staff works very hard as well.
Yes.
From the lowest paid to the highest paid, they are working their rear ends off as well. And I think that when we look at it, we have so many more staff members to take care of than Blueprint and the county. I understand we have one department that's the size of the county. So you're right, we are in a different position, but the message that we send has to be clear, that we know that everybody works hard and everybody is deserving. But in times like this, we're not in a position to do what we would like to do. Perhaps in future years, we will be able to do that. But right now, on the city side, we saw yesterday where we are and what we're doing and what we have to do. We have to balance our budget, and right now, in order for that to happen, we are not able to look at raises. And so I want our city employees who may be listening or watching to know that you are valued. You are valued beyond value, and it's not that we don't want to do raises. It's just that the budget forecast says right now we cannot afford to do raises and keep everybody at work. We're trying to keep everybody at work and not have to furlough like many others have had to do. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Parker?
Yes, I empathize with where two commissioners are, but I believe that one of these items here, what gets me this year is that under the microscope, you will find where our staff went over and beyond the call of duty. And I think that Commissioner Matlow's comments wax humane upon the spirit of my heart. And that is that we asked them to come up with the COVID money for 1.1 million and 1 million on another, and they stopped, hit the brakes, and created and administered a program to take care of all of the businesses who would apply, and they did it flawlessly, and they did it in an extraordinary moment. And it's one thing for the tugboat to come, but when the Titanic already resting on the bottom of the ocean, it's up, it gets there, but it's too late. And I believe that this year, the extraordinary strides, the very humanitarian bugle call for them, and I recognize them as employees of Blueprint. I don't know what the city doing with their budget and all, and their employees. I don't even know what the county doing, and if their employees are going to get a raise. But these folk don't work for them. They work for us as Blueprint. And in that spirit, they have tried to take care of everybody that submitted a sheet of paper. And as I looked at the paper today and looked at PPP and looking at the next round of, our staff is the one facilitating, feeding everybody else. So they don't work for the city. They work for Blueprint. So it's hard to compare the city's problems and issues and budget and restraints and constraints and restraints and press that on them. That don't make sense to me. So hard as they work to save everybody's life in this community, $90,000 is not going to take food off our table, but $53 million will. And if we can give up $53 million on a piece of money that was only carried among the voters and to the voters for 20 million, we done gone behind the voters back for $33 million that they didn't approve of. And we can't give these hardworking people that gave to everybody in this community, y'all to be shamed. I'm asking you, I understand your city responsibility, but I'm asking everybody at this table to respect, understand, and recognize that Dozier is asking for the humanitarian gesture of us taking care of those who done took care. They've been the Red Cross, they've been Blue Shield, they've been the Boy Scout, they've been Blueprint, they done it all. And they may have to step up and do some more as C-19 spreads. So that right there is my ask of our commission, to be humane and to keep our consideration of our budget in the parameters of what we are dealing with now, and that's Blueprint. All of y'all, we need to support this ask of Commissioner Dozier.
Madam Chair, on point.
And it ain't got nothing to do with the fact that the Fairground got some money. Fairground been married to that money on its own merit.
Madam Chair, on point.
Go ahead.
Let me just add, Commissioner Proctor is correct. They have worked hard, but they did not do this work without the help of some city staff as well. Right. The infrastructure that was used to do this was stood up by city staff, our technology team. And Lord knows they had to stop on a dime and give change. So no disrespect. This is not being inhumane to the Blueprint. They know that. They know how I feel about them. We're friends. I understand that. But we have to remember that, yes, this is Blueprint, but we all work together. City staff who are not getting raises, may not be getting raises, did some of this work too. And so we have janitors that we need to be concerned about. We have frontline workers that we need to be concerned about, who some of them only make $12 an hour. And so we have to think about that as well. So I'm not discounting how much work got done to make things happen. And we appreciate that, being in staff, and Christina and Susan and everybody else, Angela, we appreciate that. But I'm just saying, nobody's saying you didn't work hard. Nobody's saying you didn't deserve it. We're just saying that the people who work alongside you to make it happen may not be getting it. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Madam Chair, one last comment.
Wait. I don't even know who's speaking.
That was Kristen. The maker of the motion.
Okay.
I don't know where I am.
Commissioner Dozier, we are 1 minute out from our meeting, our 3 o'clock scheduled meeting. So I'm going to give you a minute to go ahead and give you your final comments since you made the motion. Commissioner Richardson, is it something that you really just have to say?
Well, I do.
Okay, well, let me take Commissioner Dozier first. Go ahead, Commissioner Dozier, then I'll be right back to you.
I'll split my 1 minute, 30 seconds with Commissioner Richardson, okay? I am also a city resident. I celebrate the incredible hard work of city employees. This is a blueprint budget meeting, and due respect, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, Blueprint, CRTPA, everyone else pays the city for the hard work of your IT and HR services and everything else. That is phenomenal. It still comes out of a different budget. The only thing I can do today is advocate for the employees who are funded by the agency we are representing at this moment. And I just want to finally say this puts either government in a hard position because the county is going to offer COLA for next year. So I think it's a little unfair to say it's hard for one government or the other. We need to stay focused on this agency and this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In light of where we are as a city, I would have a difficult time supporting this motion. I think that you look at the fact that staff didn't include that COLA in the budget themselves. They could have done that. They didn't. I appreciate the hard work that they do, all of us do. That goes without saying. I think in future years, if we want to come back when the economy is doing better, and we want to make up for the fiscal year 21 when we didn't give a COLA, we can certainly do that. But at this point, it would be difficult for me to support this motion when staff didn't put it in the budget and we're not doing it for city employees. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and have the vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Roll call, please.
Okay, we'll start, county side this time. Commissioner Deloge.
No.
Commissioner Proctor.
Yes.
Commissioner Minor.
Yes.
Commissioner Dozier.
Yes.
Commissioner Lindley.
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox.
Yes.
Okay. City side, Mayor Daley.
No.
Commissioner Madlow.
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson.
No.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
No.
And Madam Chairman.
No.
Okay, give us just a moment.
All right.
Hold on, just one second. Just one moment. I want to get it right. Yes, the motion on the weighted, I appreciate your patience. We had 1 yay on the city side and we had 5 yays on the county side. We applied the weighted vote. So it actually, it fails by 1 point. The motion fails. Thank you.
Okay, we're at 4 minutes after 3. I'm going to first ask you, is it okay to start the meeting? If it's okay with everyone, give you a 5-minute stretch break. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned, and our regular IA board meeting will start at 3:10.
Okay.